Hello, everyone. I hope you're having a wonderful day. Today, we're exploring a heartfelt Vu Lan story about a broken jade bracelet, a daughter-in-law sacrifice, and one unexpected act of kindness that changes everything. If you enjoy this story, don't forget to subscribe so you never miss our next video. The first days of the Vu Lan season arrived with a quiet sense of reverence. Incense smoke drifted gently through the ancestral altar room, filling the still air with a familiar fragrance. Mother Loi stood in front of the family altar, dressed in a dark silk blouse. With a clean cloth in her hand, she carefully wiped away the thin layer of dust that had settled around the altar. Her aging hands trembled slightly, but every movement remained slow and respectful. Around her wrist was a deep green jade bracelet. To anyone else, it might have looked like a beautiful piece of jewelry, but to Mother Loi, it was far more than that. It was the only keepsake she still had from her late mother, something she had protected for many years because it carried memories that could never be replaced. Then, in a single careless moment, her wrist brushed against the incense burner. The bracelet slipped free. It fell onto the tiled floor. A sharp sound broke the silence. Mother Loi froze. The jade bracelet had split into two pieces. For several seconds, she simply stared at the broken jade lying on the floor. Then she dropped to her knees and reached for the pieces with trembling hands. She pressed them against her chest, and suddenly, she began to sob. "Oh, God, this was the only thing your grandmother left me. I've done something terrible, Tu Tien." Her voice shook with guilt. Outside in the yard, Tu Tien heard the sound and rushed inside. The moment she entered the altar room, she saw Mother Loi kneeling on the floor with tears running down her face. Tu Tien immediately knelt beside her and placed an arm around her shoulders. "Mom, please don't blame yourself. Let me keep the pieces safe. I promise I'll find the best craftsman I can and have it repaired for you. If you keep crying like this and make yourself sick, it will hurt me even more." Tu Tien knew that words alone could not make the bracelet whole again. She also knew she could not erase the accident, but she could not stand there and watch Mother Loi continue to punish herself over something that had happened in a single moment. Carefully, Tu Tien picked up the two broken pieces of jade. She wrapped them inside a clean handkerchief and held them gently in her hands. To someone else, they might have looked like nothing more than pieces of a damaged bracelet. But Tu Tien saw them differently. She saw a promise. She would find a way to repair the bracelet, and if repairing it required money, then she would earn that money herself. Before the morning light had fully appeared, Tu Tien was already walking toward the Bat Do bamboo forest with a large woven basket strapped to her back. Thick white mist covered the narrow path ahead of her. Wild grass brushed against her legs as she moved deeper into the forest. Everything was quiet. The only sounds came from leaves shifting beneath her feet and the soft movement of the basket against her back. Tu Tien kept walking. She had not come into the forest to enjoy the peaceful morning. She had come for bamboo shoots. Every large shoot she could carry home represented another small chance to earn the money she needed for Mother Loi's bracelet. When she reached the area where the shoots were growing, Tu Tien lowered the basket from her back and gripped the handle of her curved harvesting knife. Then she started working. One strong cut, then another. Large bamboo shoots were separated from the damp ground one after another. The work looked simple from a distance. It was not. The fine, sharp fibers covering the bamboo shoots scraped against her skin. Sticky sap clung to her hands. Before long, her fingers began to swell. Small cuts appeared across her skin. Some of them started to bleed. Tu Tien pressed her lips together and continued. The pain was real. So was the exhaustion. Even though the morning air was still cold, sweat had already gathered across her forehead. The basket slowly became heavier. Her hands hurt more with every movement. Still, she did not stop. Whenever the pain made her hesitate, she remembered Mother Loi kneeling beside the broken bracelet. She remembered the tears. She remembered the promise she had made. So Tu Tien bent down again. One bamboo shoot, then another. There was no guarantee that this trip into the forest would give her enough money to repair the bracelet. There was no guarantee that any of this would be easy. But she knew she had to begin somewhere. By the time she finally left the forest, the basket on her back was full. Her hands were swollen and scratched. Yet she was not returning empty-handed. She was carrying the first result of the promise she had made to Mother Loi. And once Tu Tien brought the bamboo shoots home, the work was far from over. She lit the wood fire and placed a large iron pot above the flames. The fresh bamboo shoots had to be boiled first to remove their bitterness. Steam filled the small kitchen as she waited patiently for each batch to cook. Afterward, she sliced the bamboo into thin pieces and arranged them carefully across wide-woven trays. The trays were then placed above the cooking fire. That was when the long night truly began. Smoke thickened inside the earthen kitchen. It drifted into Tu Tien's face again and again, burning her eyes until tears ran down her cheeks. She wiped them away. Then she continued. Using a pair of long cooking chopsticks, she turned the bamboo slices one by one so they could dry evenly. Again and again. As the night grew deeper, the kitchen became quieter. Only the sound of burning wood remained. Tu Tien's thin figure moved between the fire and the drying trays, checking each piece with the same patience she had shown from the beginning. Her hands were still sore from the forest. Her eyes were red from the smoke. Her body was exhausted. But slowly the bamboo began to change. The pale slices turned a rich golden color. Their texture became dry and firm. A strong, earthy aroma began to fill the kitchen. Tu Tien looked at the finished bamboo shoots and knew the sleepless night had not been wasted. Every piece represented work. Every bit of work could become money. And every amount she earned could bring her one step closer to repairing Mother Loi's bracelet. By the time the night finally began to fade, the batch was ready. Tu Tien was exhausted. Her eyes burned, her hands still hurt, but in front of her was a beautiful batch of golden, dried bamboo shoots. One long night was over, and when morning came, Tu Tien would take everything she had worked for to the district market, hoping that her effort would finally become enough money to bring Mother Loi's precious bracelet back together. The next morning, Tu Tien carried the dried bamboo shoots to the district market. The market was already alive with noise. Sellers called out to customers. People moved from one stall to another, bargaining, choosing vegetables, carrying baskets, and preparing for the Vu Lan observance. For Tu Tien, it felt completely different from the silence of the bamboo forest and the smoky kitchen she had spent the night in. She carefully arranged her dried bamboo shoots for sale. The golden color immediately caught people's attention. The bamboo had been dried thoroughly, and the rich, earthy aroma drew customers toward her stall. One person stopped to buy a small amount. Then another customer came. Before long, more people gathered. The batch sold much faster than Tu Tien had expected. For the first time, after so much physical exhaustion, she could finally see the result of her work in her own hands. Small bills began to gather in front of her. Tu Tien picked them up carefully. One by one, she smoothed them flat and placed them inside her handkerchief. Every bill carried meaning. This was money earned from the bamboo shoots she had cut with swollen hands. Money earned from the long walk through the misty forest. Money earned from the sleepless night beside the wood fire. And in Tu Tien's mind, every bit of it was meant for one thing. Mother Loi's bracelet. She was still organizing the money when the sound of someone crying caught her attention. Tu Tien looked toward a corner of the market. An elderly woman was sitting on the ground. It was Ms. Hoa. She was small and thin, dressed in worn brown clothes. Her hands trembled as she searched desperately through an almost empty woven basket. Tears streamed down her face. Tu Tien looked at the money in her hands. Then she looked back at Ms. Hoa. After a moment, she stood and walked over. Tu Tien crouched beside the older woman and gently rubbed her back. "Ma'am, what happened?" Ms. Hoa lifted her face. Her eyes were red from crying. "I lost my cloth bag," she said between sobs. "That money took me an entire year to save. I came here today to buy sticky rice and a chicken for the 7th month offering to my ancestors. Now I have nothing left." Tu Tien fell silent. She understood exactly what it meant to lose money that had taken so long to save. And the truth was, Tu Tien needed money badly herself. Mother Loi's bracelet was still broken. The 2 pieces of jade were still carefully racked in the handkerchief she carried. The money from the bamboo shoots represented the forest, the cuts on her hands, the smoke in her eyes, and a night without sleep. If she kept all of it, she would be much closer to having the bracelet repaired. But sitting in front of her was an elderly woman crying because she could no longer prepare an offering for her ancestors during Vu Lan. Tu Tien did not hesitate for long. She opened the handkerchief containing the money. Then she divided what she had earned into 2 equal parts. Tu Tien placed half of it into Ms. Hoa's hand. After that, she picked out the best bag of dried bamboo shoots she still had and gave that to her as well. "Please take this money and buy what you need for the offering," Tu Tien said gently. "And take these bamboo shoots, too. You can cook them with glass noodles and offer the dish to your ancestors. Please don't cry anymore." Miss Hoa stared at the money. Then she looked at Tu Tien. Her eyes filled with tears again, but this time they carried something different. She held Tu Tien's hand tightly. "What is your name? Where do you live? Please tell me so I can remember the person who helped me today." Tu Tien smiled softly. "Please don't worry about that. Think of it as a small act of goodwill during the season of filial devotion." She asked for nothing in return. No promise. No repayment. Then Tu Tien stood and continued on her way with only half of the money she had worked so hard to earn. Her next stop was a jewelry shop. By noon, Tu Tien stepped inside Mr. Sun's shop and carefully opened the handkerchief containing the broken bracelet. She placed the 2 pieces of jade on the counter. Mr. Sun was a middle-aged jeweler with a serious expression. He picked up a magnifying glass and examined the jade closely. After several moments, he put the glass down. "This is old jade," he said. "To join it properly, it will need very careful gold wrapping. The gold and the labor will be expensive. Do you have enough to pay for it?" Tu Tien slowly opened the handkerchief containing the money she had left. She counted the small bills. Once. Then again. It was not enough. Her shoulders lowered. After everything she had done, she was still standing in front of the broken bracelet without enough money to repair it. Tu Tien quietly reached for the pieces of jade, preparing to wrap them again and leave. At that moment, the shop door opened. Ms. Hoa walked inside carrying a basket of food. The moment she saw Tu Tien, her face changed. "Oh, it's you." Tu Tien looked up in surprise. Then Ms. Hoa turned toward the jeweler. "Son, this is the young woman who helped me this morning. She gave me money to buy the offerings." Tu Tien froze. Ms. Hoa was Mr. Sun's mother. The older woman quickly told her son everything. She told him about losing the cloth bag. She told him about having no money left for the Vu Lan offering. She told him how Tu Tien had given away half of the money she had just earned. And she told him about the best bag of dried bamboo shoots Tu Tien had given her. Mr. Sun became quiet. His eyes moved toward Tu Tien's hands. He noticed the swelling, the scratches, the marks left by the work she had done. Then he looked at the small amount of money on the counter. Mr. Sun gently pushed it aside. "Your devotion and your kindness are worth more than gold," he said. "I will personally use my best gold to join this bracelet. Consider it my way of thanking you for helping my mother." Tu Tien stood there, almost unable to respond. She had never imagined that the kindness she showed in a corner of the market would lead her to this moment. That night, Tu Tien returned home with the restored bracelet. The 2 pieces of jade that had once been broken apart were now joined by delicate gold work. She walked to Mother Loi's bedside and sat beside her. Gently, Tu Tien took her mother-in-law's hand. Then she placed the bracelet back around Mother Loi's wrist. Mother Loi looked down. For a long moment, she said nothing. This was the bracelet that had fallen onto the floor. The bracelet that had made her collapse in tears. Now it was resting on her wrist again, restored in a new form. Tears began to roll down Mother Loi's face. She slowly sat up and pulled Tu Tien into her arms. "You have suffered so much because of me." Tu Tien did not say much. She simply held her mother-in-law. The cuts from the forest, the smoke, the sleepless night, and the money she had given away all seemed lighter in that moment. Nearby, a simple vegetarian Vu Lan meal had been prepared. Among the dishes was a steaming bowl of bamboo shoot soup with glass noodles and shiitake mushrooms. Those same bamboo shoots had taken Tu Tien into the forest. They had kept her awake through the night. They had brought her to the market where she met Ms. Hoa. And from that meeting, the future of Mother Loi's bracelet had changed. Tu Tien had given when she was still in need. Ms. Hoa remembered. Mr. Sun answered that kindness with his own skill, and Mother Loi could once again wear the keepsake of her mother. The jade bracelet had been joined with gold, but what truly connected everyone in that story was something far more valuable: filial devotion, and kindness given without ever expecting it to return.